Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today on Tag Tuesday. It's a tag that I was tagged in by its creator. It's the BookTube at the Gym tag, which is created by Brian at Bookish. And I will leave a link to his original video because if you haven't seen it, you really have to. It's a hoot. And the whole tag deals with the improbable pairing of BookTube and the gym. I think that's why the tongue is firmly in cheek throughout the whole thing. And it of course, he tagged me because in his video he said, I have an appreciation for those who do go to the gym, even though I don't go myself. And that is partially true. I've mentioned on this channel many times that I very much prefer the company of young people, and have always done that, so that some of the teenage boys that I hung around with a long time ago are now pushing retirement. And I've continued to do that, and they're great company. They're great. It's great company to hang around with such people, and that necessarily means that I'm familiar with the gym. I don't actually do anything in the gym myself anymore, but I know all of these terms in this tag, and I know a lot of the mentality involved as well. So let's just jump right in. The first one is, I'm afraid the first two questions I'm going to be a little bratty about, but you knew that when you married me. We'll push on from there. The first one is Bench Press, and that is a book that you're proud to have read. And right out of the gate, I have to be a bit of a problem because I don't associate pride of any kind with reading. I don't pride of accomplishment. I don't associate that anything like that one way or another, either proud or ashamed of any kind. So I'm going to skip this question. And the next question is precious little better, and that is Leg Day. The original tag points out that a lot of dedicated gym bunnies will skip Leg Day, or they'll be inclined to. And the reason for that is because Leg Day is awful, and if you do it correctly, it annihilates your ability to walk. So I was at a gym once, years and years and years ago, with a group of young guys, and they were doing Leg Day. And when it was over, the gym was actually in the basement of a facility. And when they got to the stairs, it was like I was leading a group of palsied old cripples up the stairs. They could barely do it. So people tend to skip Leg Day, and that's what the question turns on. What book, genre, or author have you skipped because you don't think you can handle it? And again, I'm gonna be a bit of a brat here, because although I used to skip genres of books, I don't do it anymore. Instead, you only live once, and my enthusiasm, my inquisitiveness has got the better of me in recent decades. So, or happenstance has. Like, for instance, for years, I used to skip works of Christian exhortation, not Christian memoirs, where the writer talks about the personal dimension of their walk with Christ and how it's changed and maybe improved their lives and their relationships with others. Not that. I love reading that, and I always have. But exhortation, where the author says, this is true, this is scientifically demonstrable, this is a self-evident fact right in front of your face, and if you don't agree to it, not only are you willfully denying what you already know is true, but if you keep it up, you're going to go to hell and suffer forever. Christian exhortation, I have tried to avoid. This is a fantasy system, same as any other fantasy system, same as the fantasy system in Lord of the Rings, same as the fantasy system in Egyptian mythology that was once passionately believed by millions of people. It's an elaborate, well orchestrated fantasy sequence, and it deserves a lot of interest. I couldn't do without it, but I don't want to read a book of an author telling me that it is objectively true. Much less yelling at me that it is objectively true. And so I, for a long time, said, well, there's plenty of books like that, and I'm just going to skip them. And as chance would have it, that is the only thing that I review for Kirkus Reviews. So I get literally one of those every day. That's the price I pay for having once said I would skip them. And the same thing is true of math books. I have a profoundly non-mathematical brain, profoundly so. I can't do basic arithmetic. Basic addition, I get wrong. So I have tended to avoid, in the past, I've tended to avoid mathematical books, but they intrigue me all the same. They are the forbidden fruit. They are, so I have largely changed that attitude. I will now at least give them a try. And I have a prop. I have some props here, so you don't have to look at my smallpox scars from 1782 the whole time. And it's this one. We've seen it already. This is by Philip Ording, and it is 99 Variations on a Proof. This book has obsessed me since I got it, probably 2 months ago. Because that's all it is. That's all it is 99 variations on one proof. And I swear, there are times in this book where I've read this, I don't know how many times. I've studied individual chapters, gone at it obliquely, tried to surprise it in its sleep. And I swear there are moments when it almost makes breakthroughs with me. I just, if you have a mathematically inclined reader that you want to get a book for, find this thing and get it for them. If it's intriguing me this much, it will change their lives. So, and it's a perfect example. I wouldn't say that this was a completely fulfilling reading experience, but I wouldn't do without it. It's been fascinating, endlessly fascinating to me, and I would have missed it. I would have missed that experience if I'd skipped this just because it's about math. So I really don't tend to skip anymore. I don't skip my mental leg days anymore. And then number 3 is crunches. Those of you who don't know what that is, feel free to Google or even to go on YouTube and get a visual representation of crunches or any of these other exercises. I can't help but notice with a great degree of satisfaction that when random booktubers were looking around YouTube for clips they could include in their video, both Brian and Sean the Book Maniac settled on my boy, Scott Herman. So if you do the same thing, maybe he's just going to make a little vogue on BookTube. He's not much of a reader, but he is nice to look at. He's also a stickler for healthy form. So and a heck of a good guy. So maybe that's what's pushing his videos up in a search algorithm for people to find these things one or another. It was weird to look at 2 different BookTube videos and see this guy. I wish I could put videos in my own video, clips in my own video. I wish I could, because then I'd be the 3rd channel to do it. Those of you out there who do use editing software and can put video clips in your tags, when you do this tag, try and use a clip of Scott Herman. It'd be great if he was in all of these videos. But anyway, the prompt is, what's a book that you read because you needed to gain a better understanding of your work or history or something? And there's nothing, despite the fact that I have 2 whole bookcases right here of collections of book reviews, I don't need to read anything to better understand my work, because my work is the books themselves, not previous book reviews. But in terms of a book to understand something, the world or whatever, I have an obsession that has stuck with me for years now, and that is quantum mechanics. Quantum physics fascinates me because of how counterintuitive it is, because of what it says about the larger world, about the visible Newtonian universe, which is that all of that is false, that it doesn't have a foundation, that when you dig down to the foundation of that Einsteinian Newtonian physics, you find something that doesn't resemble it at all, that breaks all of its rules. I just think that's fascinating. Of course, quantum physics books rapidly get me in over my depth. But there's one book that I love. I go back to it all the time. I want to recommend it. It's this one. It's George Musser's Spooky Action at a Distance, in a trade paperback. I think I got the hardcover of this and just ignored it because at the time I wasn't all that curious about quantum physics. But Spooky Action at a Distance is the offhand reference that Einstein made to the phenomenon of quantum entanglement, where two particles that are not connected and that can be an enormous, as far as we know, an infinite distance away, if you affect the orientation of one, if those 2 particles are entangled, if you affect the orientation of one of them, the orientation of the other responds accordingly instantaneously. When that shouldn't be possible. According to Einsteinian physics, information can only travel at the speed of light, no faster. So it cannot be instantaneous if there's a great distance involved. And yet that has been observed. We know that happens. And it appears to be just a contradiction of one of the basic laws of the world, one of the basic laws of the universe. And quantum entanglement is the main subject of this book, but there are all sorts of other freaky quantum phenomenon that are in there. So I recommend it. And I go to it all the time for my mental crunches. I don't understand maybe more than half of what's in the book, despite the author does a very good job, but it's fairly abstruse stuff. So, and let's see, prompt number 4 is the treadmill, which is all about endurance. In my life, most of the teenage boys that I have gone to the gym with, and quite a few of them that I know now, don't do the treadmill at all. And the reason for that is because the treadmill starts to encroach on being an aerobic exercise, and they're all tobacco addicts, so they can't do it. They have the lung capacity of a small child, so they don't have the ability to do aerobics. So they just consistently avoid it. They don't go for runs. They don't work the treadmill. They don't do bicycles or anything like that because they can't. They'll turn purple and start to convulse, and they know it. So, but it's more important to them. Their jeweling is more important to them than the ability to do that, than the ability to have lungs that work. So they avoid the treadmill. But the prompt is interesting anyway, and that is a difficult book that you powered through. I never did the treadmill myself. The closest thing I've ever come to any kind of physical exercise has been running. I've in the past I have very much enjoyed. When I was younger, I very much enjoyed running. I did it religiously every day, 5.5 miles every day, or rather every night. I would wait and do it at night, and I run like a plow horse. It's a very slow and plodding and steady pace, but I don't tire. So it was wonderful, a wonderful way to just sort out your thoughts and clean out your body at the end of the day. I remember that. I have only fond memories of it. But in terms of a book that was difficult and that I powered through, it's something that we've seen on this channel. I had to do it. If Harvard University Press was going to send me a thing like this, I had to power through it. So I did. This is by Robert Brandom, and it is this. It is A Spirit of Trust. This is a 1,000-page book about Hegel's phenomenology. His heuristic metaphysical pile of absolute gibberish. Just absolute gibberish that philosophers have been studying like it was Holy Writ ever since, for 2 centuries, since Hegel wrote it. And Hegel wrote it standing on one foot with his eye out the window and 1,000 different things on his mind, chapter by chapter, flashing off to the printer. No sense or composition of the thing as a whole. No systematic framework for the whole thing, and that explains why the book itself is such gibberish. And yet this is a gigantic life's work. Apparently this guy's been working on this thing for a long, long time. This is his massive commentary on the phenomenology of Hegel, and I felt like I had to read it, so I did. I powered my way through this book. I can say without any hesitation that the author of the book, Robert Brandom, is considerably better a writer than Hegel is. But you can't make sense out of madness, and his book fails to do that because that's the reason why. What I wouldn't give if Robert Brandom had, instead of doing this book and dedicating God knows how many decades of his life to creating this thing, what I wouldn't give if he'd written a novel, or 2 novels, or a stage play, or a hard-boiled detective story he's had in the back of his mind this whole time. But no. But anyway, in terms of powering through something, I knew already that it was going to irritate me. I knew already it was going to be mind-bendingly, stultifyingly dull. But I did it anyway because it was nice of the folks at the Belknap Press to send this, so I wanted to read it at least. I don't think that I could review it. I don't think that I would be able to do that. But I did at least read it. And then let's see here. Number 5 is Lat Rose. A book or genre you read because it feels good. And in Brian's video, he mentions the Aubrey and Maturin series by Patrick O'Brien, which is a series of 20 or so Napoleonic-era seafaring fiction escapades of Captain Jack Aubrey and his friend Stephen Maturin, the surgeon. And I second that. I want to second that. Going to an Aubrey and Maturin book, anyone, is a surefire cure for what ails me. When I need something, a reading experience that just feels good, I go to that. I reread a chunk of Lord of the Rings. I read a Regency romance, something like that. I go to the old reliables. I have the Patrick O'Briens take up a whole shelf, and they're amazing. So I would second. I have lots of others, but I would second that. That's a good choice. Then number 6 is Squats, and the prompt is a depressing book that you pushed through anyway. And I'm going to use it. I'm going to cite this as one book because I believe that's what it is meant to be, even though it was 2 900-page volumes, and that's The Carbon Ideologies by William Vollmann. It's his latest literary production. It's non-fiction, and it's a gigantic elegy. It's written about the Fukushima nuclear disaster and also about the carbon disasters that are fueling the climate change and in the world today, just in general. And the books are enormous, and they are all about how there's nowhere to turn, there's nowhere to go, and there's no fixing this. This has already reached a point of no return. And to underscore that point, Vollmann writes the whole thing in the past tense. He writes it as though humanity were already extinct. He refers to humanity in the past tense. throughout the 2 books. So that was a bit depressing. I powered through it anyway. It is brilliant. I don't know if the Carbon Ideologies will ever have a paperback release. I don't know if that'll be true. It'd be 2 big paperbacks. I don't know if that will happen. I would love it if it did. That'd be great. And then prompt number 7 is bicep curls. And that is name 2 authors, because you've got the left curl and the right curl. Name 2 authors that you've read too much of. You've read too much. I have 2. One is Edgar Rice Burroughs. You might think that's heresy coming from me, because I love the John Carter of Mars novels of his. I love them. Even the second-rate John Carter books I still love. I think he was in the wavelength that he was on for just passionate, high-flying, exotic adventure when he wrote those books is just wonderful. It's a lot, but you know, and I reread those. Those would also count as pleasure books, but he wrote a lot of other stuff. A lot of his Tarzan novels are just dead on arrival, and he wrote a ton of other stuff in addition to that. And I've read it all. I've read all of Edgar Rice Burroughs, and that's way too much Edgar Rice Burroughs. But the other author I want to mention that I read too many of is by John Creasy. It's not going to be familiar to a lot of you. It's a murder mystery series starring the Toff, which is Toff was an old term, 50, 60 years ago for a swell, an idle rich hanger-on and flaneur about the boulevards of society. And Creasy wrote a series of murder mysteries, tons of them, dozens of them, probably almost 100 of them, starring the Toff as he dilettantishly, sort of offhandedly and easily solves crimes that are baffling the police in London. And I've read them all. I shouldn't have, because boy, oh boy, you've heard the phrase, you read one, you've read them all. That applies to anything. It applies to the Toff novels, but I just popped them down one after another. So, that was the bell. No, we're almost done. We're almost done, and then I'll see what's out there. So the next one, number 8, is tricep dips. And this is name 3 authors that you need to read more. And again, I'm going to end where I began, with a somewhat bratish answer to the question, because I have read the authors that I want. I read the authors that I want to read more of. The closest I could come to answering the question would be currently working authors who I want to read the rest of their work. I want to read them throughout their life, but not canonical authors. If there's a canonical author that I want to read more of, I've read all of that stuff, so I've read that author. So I'm ending sort of limpishly, but then I have to tag people, and I want to tag people because this is fun. And I don't know how fast this is going to go the rounds, but I tag David Muscle Murphy. I tag Todd's bursting biceps. I tag Richardson's reps, and I tag Biblio Charles Atlas. So I want you all to strip down to your skivvies and get to the gym. And I'm going to wrap this up for now and see what's out there. Maybe more books. And I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.